Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And a good morning to you, the morning being Thursday, September 7th, 2017, as we wait for that monster in the Caribbean to make known its intentions. Not looking good. I was walking, it was so beautiful here yesterday. I was taking a walk in the early evening and looking at this. There was a beautiful sky. I'm looking at that sky and thinking, weather. It's amazing that here I am with a whole bunch of other folks like you, and we are enjoying this glorious weather when at that very moment this storm was just devastating some of those islands. I really can't take my eyes off this thing. As I said yesterday, this approaching monster that we can keep track of in real time and yet can do nothing to prevent it from coming. All we can do is flee. So I've never seen a hurricane that had an eye like that. If there was any doubt as to why they call that an eye, this hurricane has dispelled it. Man, it's like this evil eye, wide open, perfectly round, surrounded by that extraordinary destructive energy. I mean, it's awesome. The adjectives, I mean, I once I look at it, it's almost majestic, but I can't give it that because it's so destructive. And then I noticed, and I should have known this, so as it's swirling, maybe it's because I'm right-handed, maybe it's because I live in the northern hemisphere, but when I think of something spinning, I think of it going clockwise, right? Yeah. I mean, if you were to do a spinning motion with your hand, wouldn't you go clockwise? I think we're just sort of wired that way. And then I took another awestruck glance at that hurricane, and it is spinning counterclockwise, adding to my discomfort because it doesn't seem normal. It's going counterclockwise, and we live in a clockwise part of the globe. I don't know. You can see I'm obsessed. And that island, Barbuda, my God, it's gone. It's a night, you fly over it, and everything's just flattened. The amazing thing is one death. That's what they said, one death. Where did the people that are in all those flattened buildings, where were they that they weren't killed? I can't figure that out. I'm glad, but I can't figure it out. So this is, we call this a natural disaster. Although some would argue that it is a natural disaster made worse by us, man. But it is at basically a man-made disaster. I mean, a natural disaster. A man-made disaster looks sort of like Donald Trump. That's a true man-made disaster. But speaking of that, if natural disaster and man-made disaster, maybe it's too early to start this, but I do it after the effect. We know, okay, this thing, we've seen Harvey and that devastation. Now we're waiting to see what Irma will wrought. I mean, the incredible news here is that because of our ability to see it coming, because of past experience, because there are certain building codes in place, I guess, that things are made to withstand a certain level of hurricane, the number of people who will perish because of this monster storm is nowhere near what it would be a century ago. Nowhere near. This is a kind of storm that would have killed thousands, Harvey as well. But because of technology, we get early warning, right? But that doesn't explain why we keep rebuilding in the exact same place. So that if you are flooded out every few years, that you rebuild on that same parcel. I mean, that's a definition of insanity, isn't it? And if we know, I mean, there's certain facts that we do know, even in this era of fact-free era. We do know that Florida, we do know that Houston lie at sea level or below sea level. Okay, that's one fact. We also know the sea level is rising. You could argue that to build and to have, massive populations living below sea level with the sea levels rising doesn't make any sense. It also doesn't make any sense to continue, willy-nilly, especially in the case of Houston with no zoning, to continue to develop beachfront property, to put concrete where a wetland was. A wetland is, as you know, sort of a natural way of filtering huge amounts of water. Nature did put in a perfectly, it's perfect, a perfect kind of a landscape for dealing with this kind of thing. And we destroyed it. Then we reap the result. Then we go back and we pave over more wetlands and build again. And I'm sorry, but I'm asking you, what does it take for us to acknowledge that this is stupid, that it's economically absurd? The problem is that our government incentivizes this kind of craziness. The fact that the private insurance market pulled out, they said, we're not selling flood insurance down here. What do we look nuts? That's a sure loser. We're not selling it. So we, the taxpayer, the federal government steps in and said, we'll do it. This is classic. Republicans, for instance, only want to privatize the parts of government that make lots of money. But invariably, what the government ends up taking on are those things that don't make money. They're money losers. Why should we have this federal, why should the U.S. government be in the business of flood insurance? I'm sorry, but I really don't understand it. I mean, since that, they keep talking about Hurricane Andrew 25 years ago, where they really learned their lesson. That was a hurricane. That was a Category 5. But since then, the amount of construction and resultant destruction of natural filters is mind-boggling. I remember I used to vacation at the Outer Banks with another family and my son when he was younger, and I used to every year look in confusion, really, at why are people continuing to build these monstrous McMansions right on the beach, when the beach, and you can see this going year after year, is disappearing. Why would you do that? I mean, it just seems to me like wholesale denial, sort of stubborn, childlike, cover. I don't see anything wrong. It's not there. I don't understand it. Not only are we exacerbating the damage that will be done when these monster storms come, but we're. I lost my train of thought. I'm blaming Ray. He sent me an email and I saw it and started to read it while I was talking. I'm just saying, guys, this is rising sea levels, paving over the wetlands, continuing to build. Yeah, people like to be on the ocean, on the coast. That's the priciest land. But we got to be kidding ourselves here. I don't know. Nature had things worked out pretty well, then enter us. We just screw everything up. All right, Ray, what'd you say? Knock me off here. Lynn, the hurricane's only spinning counterclockwise if you look at it from above. What? Ray. Is that what? Sorry. It's spinning counterclockwise. I mean, one thing I do remember from being a weekend weather girl, that one thing I learned after a while, is that the winds around a low pressure system, even in the northern hemisphere, spin counterclockwise. Around a high pressure system, the winds are spinning clockwise. I do know that. I'm just saying that there's something even more frightening just in my psyche about seeing counterclockwise, because in fact we know how destructive it is, and all storms are counterclockwise. I don't care what hemisphere they're in. I'm just saying. And did I not get sarcasm there or something. Jeez, I don't know. And any studio updates? Well, actually, I just emailed the guy in charge of our new studio that we'll be going to next week and said, hey, I need a tour. So once I have my tour, I'll be able to update you. Not to worry, okay? We're all going to be just fine. Oh, well, anyway, my heart goes out to all the people whose lives are going to be so disrupted and in some cases destroyed. It's heartening to see that. I think after Harvey, I can't imagine there's a dolt in Florida that wouldn't evacuate, saying, well, I've been here for I don't know how many years and I've rode out every hurricane that's come by. I'm just sticking here, getting me to run my home. Well, I just have a feeling you're going to have very few of those kinds of people because all you got to do is look at that thing. Look at it. And stare into that eye. So it's amazing how, I learned this by turning on CNN to see the latest on it. I'm actually into this. And to see that these, some people fly through the hurricanes to get information, and there's others that fly over. Ray, you reminded me of this by saying over the hurricane. If they are above it, I forget what they said, 45,000 feet or something, and they're dropping things into it, I don't know, some kind of technological thingamajig that then starts sending immediately information back to them about barometric pressure, wind speed, blah, 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 blah. So they're actually, it's the kind of thing that a weather balloon would do, but this is the opposite of a balloon going up to ascertain what's going on. These are some kind of little bots of some sort going down and then in real time delivering the latest information on the makeup of the particular storm, which then is relayed immediately back to NOAA so that they can in real time get every bit of information that can be gotten, and that's how then they continue to sort of tweak their predictions about where it goes and all that. I just think it's fascinating. There's a little teeny weeny bit of a science geek in me, very little, but this is to me amazing. All right, I think I'm done. Whatever that was. I think I'm done. So, did you see did you see the gifts that the Saudis gave our president when he was visiting them? Remember that? Remember he went over there? There was that eerie glowing orb picture with the Saudi king, and I think who else was that? Was that some other son of a bitch? And Trump was showered by gifts. But that's what the Saudis do. They got a lot of money. When Obama went over there, he got showered. But he was given a fully leather golf bag with 10 clubs. And he was given a gold-plated sterling silver sculpture of 2 horses. I'm not done. Gold-plated silver sculpture of 2 horses that was covered in diamonds, yellow sapphires, rubies, and obsidian. Well, thank you very much. I'll put it on the mantle. Well, no, you don't. Any gift valued at over $390. How they come up with that, I don't know. Any gift given to the president or any other government official valued at over $390 not only has to be reported, it has to be turned over to the government. So Obama couldn't keep or use those golf clubs. And he couldn't put that diamond, sapphire, obsidian, encrusted, gold-plated silver horse or two on the mantle. So I don't know what do they do with these things? They hand them over. So he handed his over to the State Department, which made note that now they were in receipt of all this stuff, and that they valued it at over $500,000. And they sent it over to the National Archives. So there's some pretty neat stuff probably over there in the National Archives. Why don't they just sort of open it up and have a little museum or something? I'd like to see them two horses. So anyway, that's what happens. And honorable office holders don't pocket any of this stuff over $390. They give it back to the U.S. government. So I gotta wonder if Trump would hand it all back. I just have my doubts, just my sense of him, because I would never put him in an honorable man category. So some of what he got, he didn't get a golf bag, which is strange. Maybe he did, but there's no mention of it in this piece, because God knows he plays golf more than Obama ever did. He was given a sword. He was given a shirt that they say Liberace would have loved. An orange shirt with silver floral embroidery. And he was given a leather ammunition holder and holster. And then, this is my favorite, he was given two robes lined with the fur of white tigers. Humanity at its worst. You imagine killing magnificent animals in danger of extinction so that you can use their fur to line a robe of a despicable human being. Two robes. And as if that is not enough, he was also given an orange and gold robe. And what was this one lined with? Cheetah fur. I don't see Trump giving those back. I see him lounging around in that stuff. I do. That fits his lifestyle. But I mean, it's out in the open that this stuff exists, so I guess maybe he's going to have to give it to the archives. I don't know. Mike says, this is Mike in D.C., I wonder how many of the people running for their lives from this storm are science deniers. A lot of them. It's interesting to me when someone can have two opposing thoughts in their minds at the same time. I don't know. I've given up. I don't have a clue. So, Wall Street Journal lead editorial today. I just love the idea of whoever wrote this, wrote it through, gritted teeth and, head almost exploding. I'll just do one line from it. all of this illustrates the Republican inability to govern. Yeah, well, hey, I've been saying that forever. If you want a government, you do not put people in charge of the government who do not believe in government. The Republicans' toolbox is about winning elections. That's what they know how to do, and being obdurate, standing in the way of anybody else's efforts to accomplish anything. So it's not surprising that they're dismantling now everything the last non-Republican president, in fact, constructed. They don't believe in government. That's why they don't know how to govern. They don't have a clue. It's sort of like, Mike, I mean, you say how many of these people running for their lives are also people who don't believe in, science or any, that the seas are rising and blah, 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 blah. But it's the same kind of craziness of, holding two totally disparate thoughts in your head at the same time. As Republicans running and playing with sharp elbows to acquire a position in a government that they don't believe in. Now, obviously, the reason is so they can help destroy it, help hobble it. But they don't know how to govern. Many the time I have quoted my political science professor. One of the, how you only remember a few little things from all your schooling? I mean, really. For some reason, some things just stick. And one that stuck, and it's because I still remember the guy's name. I don't remember any other professors' names. But when he said it, it was so clearly true. And it blew me away. What he said was, and I've shared this with you a million times, what he said was, the skills required to attain elected office have absolutely nothing to do, might in fact be counter to the skills required to do the job to govern. So, you have one party that knows how to govern. That'd be Democrats. They don't know how to get elected. We got another party over here that, man, they know how to get elected. But then they're given the prize. And they just stare at it and figure out ways to pull it apart. It's like a kid wanting some incredible toy for Christmas, and he gets the incredible toy, and he proceeds to destroy it. So, of course, the Wall Street Journal was absolutely flipped, as were all other members of the Republican Party, by Trump. Have to admit, it's the first thing he's done that made me chuckle. He's sitting in a meeting in the Oval Office with McConnell and Ryan and Schumer and Pelosi and his Treasury Secretary, Mnuchin, and the Vice President. And they're all talking back and forth, and his Republican people are saying, we can't, we need at least an 18-month deal on the debt ceiling, blah, 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 blah. And Mnuchin was in the middle of pontificating about why that was what they needed to do. And Trump cuts him off, according to those who were at the meeting, cuts him off and says, nah. Essentially, I made a deal. I'm making a deal. The people who he thought were making the most sense were the hated Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Imagine McConnell, Ryan, and Mnuchin sitting there and Pence in that meeting and how their jaws must have dropped. And imagine Pelosi and Schumer. And there was that picture that got leaked that was taken through a window. That looks like Trump's about to kiss Schumer. I mean, this is the kind of thing that makes Republicans' head explode. But sorry, guys. You made your bed. You sold your souls for the power that would come with this charlatan. You, in your arrogance, thought, we can play him. We can use him. We can get everything we want. Ha! So, he can't keep one thought in his, I mean, there's two pretty good pieces, almost exactly the same. One, I think they're both in the Wall Street Journal. E.J. Dionne writing one, and I'm sorry, can't remember who wrote the other, maybe David Ignatius, I don't know. But they're both saying the same thing about Trump, about how he has no principles. None. He lives only. He's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. He's not particularly a president. He's just a guy who's really insecure, who wants to be loved. That's what it boils down to. And so, whoever he's with at the moment, whose approval he wants, who he's not angry with at the moment, that's who he tends to side with. He wants their approval. I don't know. I mean, it's like what he did with DACA. So he has Jefferson, Beauregard, Sessions go out and, just gleefully upend the lives of almost 1 million families. And just one of the cruelest acts of governance we've seen in some time. And then he tweets, what is that tweet? That he will, okay, it's time for you, Congress, to get this right. You got 6 months, and if you don't pull it, if you don't fix this, and he's telling them, if you don't make DACA legislation, then I'll revisit it, meaning I'm going to step in again. But wait a minute. Within literally a few hours' time, he has totally contradicted himself. When asked about it, when there was a minute for a reporter to scream a question, he says, I am absolutely, I haven't changed my mind a bit. I don't know. I mean, he's you can't run a country with some, this is worse than a bull in a china shop. It's akin to a bull in a china shop. And we want to thank the Republicans for anointing this guy the head of their party so they could have power. And every time this bull totally destroys something that they were very carefully working on, I admit, I take pleasure, but not really. Because this is our country. Milton. Milton as usual. Milton has information. Hang on. About the presidents. Presidents and other government officials have the option to purchase the gifts they received in office for their market value. Oh, so if he really wants the white tiger robes or the cheetah robe, he can buy it. You can imagine his head exploding at this. But I was given it. They gave it to me. How can you take something that was given to me and then say I got to pay for it? You can see how it would just be mind-blowing to him. Anyway, Hillary Clinton did buy one of her gifts back, something that she'd gotten as Secretary of State. She purchased the black pearl necklace given to her by Aung San Suu Kyi, the Myanmar, the Nobel Prize winning Burma woman. And that was priced at $970. Bull. A black pearl necklace, it's thousands. So they're lowballing these things so that if they want them, they can buy them back. They're lowballing, believe me. I mean, retail, that'd be more. And by the way, we haven't talked about the wonderful Nobel Prize winning Aung San Suu Kyi, who is now essentially the leader of Burma, a country that had imprisoned her, house imprisoned for years. Myanmar is the name now, not Burma. And I'm with the people who are calling for her to give her prize back. She is, this is interesting. She's okay, she was on the outside looking in, saying all the right things, then she gains power. And she is standing by while an entire minority population in her country is slaughtered. And she's got the Nobel Peace Prize. Unbelievable. Life's complicated, huh? I happened to tweet something the other day when I saw that John McCain had come out asking the U.S. Supreme Court to undo the gerrymandering that had taken place in the state of Wisconsin. You know, I grew up in Wisconsin. I was so proud to be from there because it was such a progressive state. In fact, it was where the Progressive Party was formed. We had progressives, La Follette was the name, as our governor and as our senators and as our Secretary of States, that family. Anyway, it was always a reliably progressive state. And, you know, you love your home state, you do. But it made it easier to love it because of that. And in the last 25 years, it's become unrecognizable. It has been taken over by Republicans. Now, there wasn't some massive influx of Republicans into the state. It's the same old good, regular, upper Midwestern folk that were there before, who used to vote Democrat quite often. And all of a sudden, the governor, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the Republicans take over that state, make it one of the reddest states around. So much so, such a darling is that governor who helped orchestrate it, Walker, that everybody thought he'll be the president. Remember when he started out, he was going to be the guy. He didn't last 2 minutes. Well, anyway, the reason my state turned like that is known. And it was because Republicans were doing what they do so well. They were rigging the election. They were rigging the elections through gerrymandering. And perhaps you know that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to hear a case. They've agreed to hear this case in which, if they decide, they will say that the state of Wisconsin unconstitutionally deprived people of proper representation under the law by rigging congressional districts, by gerrymandering. The Supreme Court has never decided a gerrymander case on that issue. They've done it for racial balance. They've never said, oh, wait a minute, no, this is not what the Founding Fathers intended. You can't do this. Now, let me explain why, in Wisconsin, for instance, Republicans in Wisconsin in 2012 won less than half, minority, of the votes in a statewide election for people who will be in the House of Representatives, the state assembly. They got 48% of the votes. There were 90 seats up. Their 48% of the vote got them 60 of the seats. That's a system that's been rigged. So that is happening there. In election after election, people vote, but their votes are rigged so that they get lost. They're not given the proportional representation that the vote. That happens here in Pennsylvania too. And without a doubt, the worst gerrymandered states are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Texas. Your vote maybe didn't count because of the busy work of the guys in Harrisburg reworking the districts. So amazingly, a bunch of Republicans have gotten together and they have put in an amicus brief against the Republican Party, which is on the other side, against the RNC, against every other Republican operation, because they're desperate to get the court to say there's no problem here, because it's how they've gained power. They rig elections. They rig elections through gerrymandering. They rig elections through false voter fraud charges. They rig elections through the suppression of votes, right? They're masters at it. They know how to win elections by hook or by crook. They don't know how to govern. So John McCain, a complicated man. I love him one minute, I hate him the next. John McCain, John Kasich, Bob Dole, John Danforth, Richard Lugar, Alan Simpson. These are former Republican senators. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all things, former California governor. They have all joined together to urge the Supreme Court, please find this unconstitutional. It's not a partisan issue. Because Democrats, if they get control of a state, you think they're not going to try to do this? They'll do it too. We now see that there are all these templates and algorithms, and they can figure out exactly how to draw the line so that they'll never lose another election. And one of the guys who's joined them was the Solicitor General under President Reagan. So this is a Republican guy who argued Reagan's policies in front of the Supreme Court in as much as they ended up at the Supreme Court. And he said this is not a partisan issue. We are working for our republic, not for Republicans. Honorable man. Schwarzenegger said, it's a rigged system. It's a rigged system. You have situations where a party gets 50% of the vote, but only gets 35% of the seats. This has happened here in Pennsylvania. It happens every election. You know that? What happened to your vote? If you get 35% of the vote, then I can see getting 35% of the seats. But if you get 50% of the vote, well, then I think you should get 50% of the seats, right? If the people have spoken. This goes to the very heart of what our democracy is about. One man, one vote, right? Apparently not. Now, some states, California is one of them, have these independent commissions. Anytime you got to redraw districts, they redraw the districts. They take it out of the political sphere. That is the way to go. But of course, the people in power, usually Republicans, they'll have none of it. Alan Simpson, former Republican senator from Wyoming, he said quite literally, this kind of gerrymandering is killing our American system. This kind of thing gives me a little bit of hope. Just a little. Speaking about gerrymandered districts and the people who sit in them, Representative Tim Murphy. Oh, I don't care where he's bedding down and with whom. It's not my thing, but he's now been outed as the lover of Pittsburgh forensic psychologist who's married to a sports medicine doctor, and that marriage now is gone kaplooey, and it ain't pretty, and things are happening in the courts, and Murphy's been outed as the guy, and he now has to turn over all his email. I don't see why, but whatever. I just love it, these law and order puffed up self-righteous Republicans fucking around, right? He's asking for all of us to look the other way because his family has done nothing. He says it's all my fault. Yes, it is, sir. Whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to note it. He's on the receiving end of a gerrymandered district. That district used to be Democrat. It used to be Democrat. But then, they fixed that baby. That district is the most absurd-looking thing you've ever seen. And it now only elects Republicans. That's called rigging. And last time I looked, that's sort of unconstitutional, right? Okie doke. So the Post-Gazette had reprinted something from the Philadelphia Inquirer explaining that, the Supreme Court, speaking of the Supreme Court, that they had, I think last year or the year before, they ordered that all of the people who had been sentenced to life in prison while they were juveniles were up to be resentenced, that there was something outrageous about someone as young as 15 years old being committed to life in prison. And so states all over the country are letting people out who have served decades and decades and decades from the time they were children, and they're getting out. Pennsylvania had the largest number of juveniles sentenced to life in the country. I have to tell you something, and I've learned this just from being on the ACLU here in Pennsylvania. We live in we live in the most punitive state in terms of our criminal justice. Justice does not belong there. The word justice is a mockery system. So that we had sitting for the rest of their lives 517 juveniles. Now, some of them are 50, 60, 70 years old now. They've spent their whole lives. So they've been resentenced, and a lot of them are out now, over 100. And the Inquirer did a piece about how difficult it is. Can you imagine? You go into prison when there wasn't even 8-track recording devices. I mean, you go in and then you're let out. You know nothing but prison. And knowing the great state of Pennsylvania, I am sure they are giving these people no remuneration, no help, nothing. Just saying. But I found out that we're number one in another way, too. We put people in solitary confinement for just about anything. There are people in our Commonwealth, human beings, who have been in solitary since 1973. What is that? That's over 50 years? Is that 50 years? It's 50 years. Almost. In solitary. What? I thought there was something in the Constitution, remind me, I'm sure I'm right, something about how it was against our values and against our Constitution to allow cruel and unusual punishment. There are hundreds, over 100 people who have been in solitary confinement for decades. Pennsylvania, ladies and gentlemen. We don't mind the store. You don't have a clue what's going on in Harrisburg, nor do I. Every once in a while I find something out by virtue of the fact that because I get information from the ACLU. And my God, what's going on is nothing you would want. None of this works if we're not vigilant. None of it works. And if we could do what Kenya's able to do, have a do-over in their presidential election, then you wouldn't have Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, and then you can bet your buttons that gerrymandering case coming up in October would be decided in the right way so that some of us can get our vote back. You think you voted. Yeah, I know you went through and you voted. Me too. But the system's rigged. So here's just a sneak peek at some of what's currently making its way through your state legislature, just so you know. The House has passed, and the Senate will, a bill that would a public official would be charged with a crime. A public official would be charged with a crime if they did what? If they revealed the identity of a police officer who discharged their firearm or used force in the prior 30 days. What? This is a pressing problem here we got? What? You're going to perp walk mayors or city council people and charge them with crimes if they tell people about maybe a rogue cop on their force? They tried to pass this last year. It went to the governor's desk. The governor vetoed it. And then before they could take a vote to override the veto, their session ended, so it never became law. So they're back going through the process again. Of course, Wolf will veto it, but I got news for you. This time they'll get in under the clock, and there's not enough votes to sustain the governor's veto because the state Senate in Pennsylvania is totally Republican-controlled. Oh, another thing they got cooked up, making its way through the system in Harrisburg, the rigged system in Harrisburg, is something called the protester liability law. Now, I've read about this bill in other states. So this is one of those bills that some right-wing think tank comes up with and then finds sponsors in various legislatures throughout the country to put it in the hopper and see if you can get it through. Protester liability law. Be aware that if you intend to exercise your First Amendment right to protest, if perchance in a demonstration you end up getting nabbed by a police officer, let's say for disorderly conduct, which may or may not have happened, or whatever, even a misdemeanor. He said, get off the sidewalk or whatever, and you didn't move fast enough. If you are arrested in a protest, which of course happens all the time, and invariably people arrested in protests are then, those charges go nowhere. They're dropped. The protester liability law would say anybody who is arrested during a protest will have to pay all the costs, the public safety costs associated with whatever demonstration they were a part of. Excuse me. So if you're in a demonstration, you get detained for some reason, and you are convicted, then they're saying you can foot the bill for the police officer who arrested you and for everything else that was required. What kind? You see, this is an intent. The intent is, of course, to dampen people's eagerness to get out there and protest. Republicans, I really just don't think Republicans believe in our founding principles. The only one they seem to get is the Second Amendment. That one they love. But I don't really think that they're on board. Just my feeling. So I guess we're pretty much done here. I want to thank you. I'm going home and watch that hurricane. I'm not. But, God, I'm obsessed with it. I am. something so astonishing. Anyway, my best to you. Stay aware. That's all I can say. Please stay aware. And I'll talk at you again tomorrow. And the good news is next Wednesday, we'll be taking calls. I so miss your voice. So hang in there. There's light at the end of this tunnel. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.